shall rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. There shall be famines and pestilences and earthquakes, and this gospel of the kingdom shall be preached in all the world, and then shall the end come.
Tell us, when will these things be? And what will be the sign of your coming and of the end of the age?
Well, good afternoon, everybody, and I want to welcome you to Monday's edition of End of the Age. I'm Dave Robbins. I'm sitting in for Irvin Baxter today, and actually for the next 2 weeks. Irvin took 2 weeks off, believe it or not, to finish the book that he's been writing. Early on in 1986, he wrote a book, A Message for the President. He's actually going to update that book. He's in the process of doing that, basically rewriting the whole thing. But it's going to be an updated version of the original book, and we're going to try to get it in the hands of Donald Trump and all the other movers and shakers in the United States. And I know a lot of you guys will want a copy of that as well. So he's taken 2 full weeks off. And so I'll be joining you for the next 2 weeks every day, except for a couple days where we might have some of our the awesome programs that we've had over the last year or two. We might replay those. For those of you that really don't know some of that information, maybe our tour guide from Israel, we're fixing to take another tour. We take 2 tours a year, one in the spring, one in the fall. And so for those of you that would like to join us, we'd love to have you do that. You can sign up. We've got 50-some already signed up for the fall tour. And so we would like to have you join us as well for that. Now, the Bible provides us with many prophecies, not just 1 or 2. There's about 1,000 prophecies concerning the second coming of Jesus Christ. And a large majority of those have already come to pass. But the Bible provides us with several that will happen just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. And I'm going to discuss the ongoing fulfillment of several of those events, not just one today, but several of those events on today's edition of End of the Age. But before I do, I want to cover one aspect of our Israel tour real quick, and that the Israel tour is very, very safe. We've got a lot of people that have signed up. We've taken thousands of people over the years, and a lot of them have voiced opinions about, well, you know, my mom didn't want me to come, or my family didn't want me to come because they thought it was so dangerous and didn't know if I'd ever come home, this, that, and the other. But when they get over there and spend 2 weeks, we ask them at the end of the trip, well, was it unsafe? And they're like, no way, this place is awesome. Well, see, the fact of the matter is, Israel is very, very safe. We stay in Israel proper. And so it's very important that, you know, I think we go out to Bethlehem and things like that, but we don't go into any unsafe places. And if you think about it, up until May this year, there have been about 50 homicides in the entire nation of Israel. About 50 up until May. But in Chicago, here in the United States, they passed 200 homicides by May of this year. So think about that. As of right now, this weekend, they just passed 400 homicides just in the city of Chicago. And so if you think about safety-wise, here in the United States, there are places, even here in Dallas, there are places here in Dallas that are not real safe. And so, consequently, we don't go down there. We stay in places that we feel safe. Well, it's that way in Israel. And since we work with such awesome guides, we work with the #1 guiding agency in all of Israel. And so they know places that we can go, places not to go. Just like in your city, there's places you wouldn't go, and there's places that you feel perfectly safe going. So when people go with us to Israel, like I say, we've taken thousands of people over the years. And by the time the 2 weeks is over with, it's very comfortable, relaxing. You just get a tour Israel, see all the sights. What a wonderful trip. And so we're going to be doing Israel only here in the fall, Israel and Jordan in the spring. And so if you'd like to join us, you don't have to worry about it being, something happening to us. I don't know how many times I've been now. We've never had one issue ever. And so it's an awesome experience. We have a great time every time I've ever been. My father-in-law, Irvin Baxter's been, I think, 40 some times. I mean, he's been a lot. Never had an issue ever. And so I just wanted to tell you today, I know a lot of people have voice concerns. They've called in and said, well, I'd love to go, but I don't really feel it's very safe over there. It's just as safe as walking outside your front door at your house. There's places here in Dallas I wouldn't go. There's places in Israel we won't go. But the guides know that. So you're perfectly safe. If you want to go with us, safety is not an issue at all. It's very safe. I wanted to mention that because we got a lot of people calling in saying, I don't feel safe. It's very safe. You can talk to some of the people that have went with us for years, and they feel very safe. So if you want to go to Israel with us, call in, sign up. There's a lot of people that have already done it, and we'd love to have you go with us as well. It's a wonderful time. Now, a breath of fresh air in the news. I know there's so much chaos going on and with the fake news and everybody's against Donald Trump and all this stuff going on in the United States. And I wanted to give you a breath of fresh air before I dive off into some of the prophecies that are the ongoing fulfillment of Bible prophecies. And I actually didn't realize this until I read it today. And CBN reports that there are actually Bible studies being held at the White House. It's a spiritual awakening, and it's underway at our White House. Well, it's such a breath of fresh air to me when I read it. Some of the most powerful people in America have been gathering weekly to learn more about God's Word, and this Trump cabinet Bible study is actually making history. They've been called the most evangelical cabinet in all of history. Men and women who don't mince words when it comes to where they stand on God and the Bible. Ralph Drollinger of Capital Ministries told CBN News that these are godly individuals that God has risen to a position of prominence in our culture. They're all handpicked by President Donald Trump and Vice President Mike Pence. He states, I don't think Donald Trump has figured out that he chained himself to the Apostle Paul, Drollinger said. Well, Mr. Drollinger has started Bible studies in 40 state capitals now and a number of foreign capitals, and he teaches weekly the studies that are held in the U.S. House and Senate, and he now leads about a dozen members of President Trump's cabinet in weekly studies of the Scriptures. Isn't that a breath of fresh air to hear that? Even though they might make a mistake here and there and do different things, they're studying the Word of God. And I'm telling you, you cannot go wrong by studying the Word of God. I was so happy to hear that this was happening on an ongoing basis. Now, Health Secretary Tom Price is attending, Energy Secretary Rick Perry, Education Secretary Betsy DeVos, Agriculture Secretary Sonny Perdue, and CIA Director Mike Pompeo are just a few of the regulars that attend the Bible study. It's groundbreaking, really, since Mr. Drollinger doesn't even think a formal Bible study among executive cabinet members has been held in the last 100 years. Also, Attorney General Jeff Sessions attends the study periodically. President Trump is actually invited to attend the Bible studies as well, and each week he receives a copy of Drollinger's teachings. And of course, Vice President Mike Pence is also planning to join the study as his schedule allows, and he also serves as a sponsor for the study. Now, if you remember Bible prophecy, Revelation 12:14 states that, and to the woman, which is Israel in that chapter, were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for time, times, and half a time, and from the face of the serpent. Wouldn't it be awesome if these leaders of our country would go through some Bible prophecy and understand that we will stand with Israel all the way to the end. I believe some of them may have already been through it, because the United States really has been a protector until recently, before the Trump administration, when they kind of got their back turned on there right at the end. But of course, Donald Trump is 100% supporter of Israel. But what if some of these guys studied the prophecies of the Bible and says, hey, look, we've got to stand with Israel. More than a traditional standing with them, a lot of them are realizing, hey, it's biblical. We have to stand with the nation of Israel all the way to the end. And of course, that's what prophecy says that the United States will do. We won't be part of that world governing body. We're going to stand with Israel all the way to the end. And I hope that in this Bible study, that some of these teachers will take them through some of the prophecies of the Bible as well. I would love to have Irvin Baxter come and teach. We'll have to see what the future holds as far as that goes. Maybe perhaps his book will be presented to them at some point. That's what we're praying for and hoping for and believing for. So you'll have to pray with us for that. Keep Irvin Baxter in your prayers as he writes his book over the next couple weeks. I know when he gets done, that I watched the program. I took over the program for a couple weeks here. I don't know, maybe it's been a year ago, so he could write the first half of it. Well, he's trying to get the next half done in these couple weeks here, and he's got a goal. He's lined everything out. I think he's going to get it done, and so we'll all want to get a copy of that once he gets it finished. Now, let's kind of move over into the prophecy segment of the program, because there's so much happening on a prophetic front now that I didn't really want to just cover one. Normally in my programs, I'll cover one specific topic: the mark of the beast, the peace agreement, the sixth trumpet war, and spend a whole hour on one topic, which I could spend several hours on each one because there's so much going on. But on today's program, I'm going to try to cover several, give you a variety of prophecies, the ongoing fulfillment of several prophecies. So a lot of you will recognize from our teachings over the years a 7-year timeline, Daniel's 70th week. It's that 7 years just prior to the second coming of Jesus Christ. The Bible provides us with an accurate timeline of explicit instructions to guide us through the dangerous or the tumultuous events that lie just ahead. The Bible foretells a final 7-year period that will immediately precede the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ. It also describes the specific event that will mark the beginning of that final 7-year period. That's the reason we call it this prophesied event, the prophecy with a date on it. Now, we don't go around setting dates like January 1, the Lord's going to come. But the Bible says when you see this event happen, that then you can know that there's about a 7-year period left until everything wraps up. So all we have to do is watch for the initial event that marks the beginning of the timeline to then know that, hey, there's only 7 years left until the culmination, the second coming in the Battle of Armageddon. So what's the event? Well, it's a peace agreement, the Middle East Peace Treaty. That's what marks the beginning of the final 7 years. In Daniel 9:27, it prophesies that the Antichrist will confirm a covenant with many for a 7-year period. So the accord is actually going to be a confirmation of God's covenant with Abraham that Israel would always have a homeland in the promised land. It's found all the way back in Genesis chapter 15, verse 18. God said, Abraham, at this time I enter into covenant with you. So when the Old Testament writers talked about the covenant, they knew exactly what the covenant was. And so it's found in Genesis 15:18. God promised the land of Israel to Abraham through his descendants, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, through that lineage. And so it's very important. We know that God promised them that land forever, never to be taken away, never to be sold, never to be negotiated away in a future peace agreement. And so that little nation that sits on the Mediterranean Sea, as we speak, we go there twice a year, that was promised to the Israelites, to Abraham 2,000 years ago. Now, the fulfillment of this prophecy will be the signing of a peace agreement between Israel and the Palestinians. And this is very key. The prophesied agreement must do three things. If the Oslo Peace Accord was signed back in 93, that was not the agreement because it didn't have these three characteristics to it. And the three characteristics are this. Number one, it will establish a Palestinian state in Judea, currently the West Bank. There will be a two-state solution created in the near future. Number two, and I'll get to this in a second and show you, I'll use current events to show you how this is coming to pass in just a moment. Number two, it will allow for the Jewish settlers presently living in the West Bank to remain in their homes, living as a Jewish minority in that Palestinian state. You say, oh no, there's no way that Jews would live out there under Palestinian rule. Well, I'm fixing to show you where a lot of them are actually willing to do just that. And then number three, it'll place the Temple Mount, so much controversy over the Temple Mount right now. Who has sovereignty over the Temple Mount? Well, this future agreement is going to place the Temple Mount under an internationally supervised sharing arrangement, just like the cave at Machpelah. And it's going to allow both Jews and Muslims to worship there. Now, I can prove all that scripturally. I'm not going to take time to do that today because I'll never get to my points. But just trust me, those are the three characteristics of a future peace agreement. So when you see the prophesied peace agreement, then you can know assuredly that the final 7 years, that's the event that marks the final 7 years, it starts it. Then you can know assuredly that the final 7 years to the Battle of Armageddon and the second coming of Jesus Christ has begun, that final 7-year stint. So Donald Trump, Jared Kushner, Jason Greenblatt, all these guys they're working back and forth with Israel and their Arab neighbors trying to get this regional peace agreement signed. They're working. And many leaders around the world, Emmanuel Macron, he's wanting to have his own peace initiative, a France peace initiative, China, Russia, they're all working, trying to get these things done. They're offering their assistance. And when we see a peace agreement in the near future that has those three characteristics to it, folks, once they sign that, we just started the final 7 years. And so that's what we're watching for. Will that happen this year? I don't know. They're trying to. They're trying to have a Middle East Peace Summit in September. And will they get it signed? I mean, it's possible that they could. Can I guarantee you 100%? No, I can't. Because they've tried it before and it's failed. But this one, Donald Trump's got a few more tricks up his sleeve. He's got a little more leverage than the previous administrations have had. He's tried an unprecedented effort, really, to bring all the Arab nations together. And so there's a lot more going on here than the previous administrations have tried. Unprecedented efforts. So who knows? We might get something done. Well, over the last few days, the Israel National News reports that Netanyahu actually offers up major land swaps with the Palestinian Authority. You say, well, hold on, Netanyahu's going to offer up some of the promised land to trade land for peace? Well, it appears that's what's fixing to happen. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu has informed the Trump administration, according to Channel 2 last Thursday night, that he was prepared to make considerable concessions from pre-1967 Israel to the Palestinians. You understand the line that Israel conquered in 1967. They drove Jordan back across the Jordan Valley. And so when you say pre-1967, they're talking about that line that outlines the West Bank. And they're saying, hey, Netanyahu just said last Thursday night, or he said recently, but they reported last Thursday night, that he was willing, he's talking with Donald Trump and Jared Kushner and the rest of them, to give up land swaps. We'll give you this section of land, we're keeping this section. Now, from the pre-1967 Israel to the Palestinian Authority, he's willing to do that in a final status agreement in exchange for Israel's annexation of major population centers in Judea and Samaria. He's saying right here, I'm willing to give up land for peace. A lot of people think he wouldn't. He's now saying, I'm willing to. And this is the peace agreement that we're talking about that would start the final 7 years. Prophesied, get this, 2,500 years ago. Now we're staring it right in the face. Now, according to the report, Netanyahu made the offer during the meetings with White House envoys on Thursday, stating that his government would be prepared to surrender territory in the Wadi Era region, east of the Netanyahu Adera Haifa block in the coastal plain, in exchange for a final status agreement or a peace agreement with the Palestinian Authority, which recognized Israel and the annexation of large settlement blocks in Judea and Samaria, including the Gush Etzion block, which we go there every year on our tours. So if it's true, the proposal marks the first time, get this, the first time that Prime Minister, not over the past several administrations, the first time the Prime Minister has gone on record offering significant territorial concessions from pre-1967 Israel in exchange for a final status agreement with the Palestinian Authority. So the Bible says, 2,500 years ago, Daniel prophesied, Daniel 9:27, in the future, there's going to be a peace agreement signed between confirming Israel's right to exist in the Middle East, and that would start the final 7 years to the second coming of Jesus Christ, the Battle of Armageddon. Netanyahu has now went on record for the first time and said, I'm willing to do major land swaps in order for there to be a final status agreement. Now, do you believe in prophecy or not? If not, if that doesn't convince you, just that one, I've got a lot of them, but just that one would convince you, wow, you got to look at that and say, man, the Bible's pretty awesome. Because think of that, 2,500 years ago, and we're watching it come into pass right before our very eyes. Now, remember what I just said about the land swaps. So the prophesied agreement, it's going to create a Palestinian state in the West Bank, and it's the area referred to in the Bible as Judea and Samaria. Now, there are presently, I'm going to say, I think there's maybe close to 800,000 Jews living out in that area. And it's going to begin the new Palestinian state when they get it done. Those Jews are going to be allowed to continue to live in the Palestinian state as a Jewish minority, those who choose to. The logic is going to be that there are about 1.6 million Arabs living as an Arab minority in the Jewish state. So I may have that figure off. Maybe it was 400,000 to 500,000, not 800,000. You'll have to fact check me on that. But it could be, it's between 400,000 and 800,000. I'm not 100% sure right off the top of my head. However, the thought process is that, hey, there's 1.6 million Arabs living as an Arab minority in a Jewish state, so why shouldn't Jews be allowed to live in the Palestinian state? Now, you might be saying, no way. There's no way a Jewish settler is going to stay out in the West Bank under Palestinian rule. Well, I'm going to ask you to think again on that point, because in 2014, 3 years ago, the Christian Science Monitor reported that there are many Israeli settlers that are willing to live in a Palestinian state should a two-state solution be created. Nakum Pachinek, who has in his newly built home in his unauthorized Israeli outpost, is steps away from the Palestinian vineyard and an Israeli military watchtower, and which is signs of the decades-old feud over land ownership in the West Bank. But unlike most settlers on those outposts who insist on Israeli sovereignty and Israeli security, Mr. Pachinek hopes that one day his home, get this, will be protected by Palestinian police as a Jewish citizen of a state of Palestine. He says he's ready to live alongside Palestinian neighbors, obey Palestinian speed limits, pay Palestinian taxes. He's part of a small minority of Israeli settlers whose ties to the biblical land of Israel actually trump their need to live inside modern Israel's borders. So there will be people that stay out there under Palestinian rule. Now, they say that even if Israel agrees to disband West Bank settlements under a future peace agreement, They would prefer to remain on land handed over to the Palestinians because they believe in the Bible. They state, we don't need evacuation. If out of 600,000 settlers, there would be 60,000 who wants to stay, then they should accept them. They said such preferences used to be held only by a snippet of Israeli settlers in the community, but the idea was endorsed by Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu, hear that? That they could stay out there, who said he doesn't plan to uproot Jewish settlements in the West Bank like his predecessor Ariel Sharon did down in Gaza when they evacuated 5,000 of them kicking and screaming. He said he's not going to do that. An anonymous official in the Prime Minister's office later told reporters that settlers living in the areas slated for a Palestinian state should be given the option to stay. Why force them to leave if they want to stay? They reported that the idea of allowing settlers to remain might make it easier for Netanyahu to strike a deal, since it means fewer forced evacuations of settlers. A recent poll by the dovish Blue and White Future Group suggested that 40% of the 100,000 settlers living east of Jerusalem's separation wall would not leave voluntarily. 40%, that's 40,000 people. Pachinik said he has no plan for how this would work. However, other like-minded settlers have drawn up a document calling for the creation of two states with open borders in which some Israeli and Palestinian citizens would be permitted to be residents of the neighboring state. And they're living on biblical land. That's the biggest thing to them. The desire to remain at all cost on land known in biblical times as Judea and Samaria is not limited to minority dovish settlers. And so here you see that they are actually willing. There are settlers living out there, thousands of them, that are willing to live under a Palestinian state created by a peace agreement in the near future, just like Bible prophecy says will happen.
On December 23, 2016, the United Nations passed a resolution that will lead the world into the Battle of Armageddon. Every person on earth should watch. First step to Armageddon. Irvin explains exactly what happened on December 23, 2016, and illustrates why the events of that day will ultimately culminate into the final battle described in the book of Revelation. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or go to endtime.com and order yours today. The world's greatest revival is just ahead. How far are we from the Battle of Armageddon, and what will happen between now and then? The prophecies of the Bible clearly foretell of major events that will come to pass over the next few years. God did not intend for His people to stumble blindly through the end times. Irvin Baxter covers the final 7 years with the timeline of events. Sixth trumpet war, Israel's third temple, the Antichrist, 666, and the world's greatest revival just ahead. From Here to Armageddon gives the location of the prophecy, explains what it means, and shows how world conditions are presently converging for the fulfillment of prophecy. These cutting-edge teachings will open eyes to understanding like never before. Order your From Here to Armageddon 8-lesson series right now. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. Or go to endtime.com. Order yours today.
If your station only carries the first 30 minutes of End of the Age, go to endtime.com and click the Watch button to continue today's broadcast. You can also finish up later by clicking the Archives button.
So folks, now you can see that that's just one prophecy that we can see coming to pass. It's an ongoing fulfillment of that prophecy right now. And the future peace agreement that will be signed, that will mark the beginning of the final 7 years to the second coming of Jesus Christ in the Battle of Armageddon. Now, before I get off into another prophecy, global warming and climate change, I've kind of got a neat question to answer here. I want to talk to you about a sale that we have going on right now. We ran it over the weekend. It ends tonight at midnight. And so I want to make sure that you hear about it, because we ran the thing this weekend and people kind of went nuts over it. So we said, okay, we'll end it at midnight tonight. And we have a lot of products. The first one is the Foundation of Prophecy series. It normally costs $214. It's on sale right now for $159.20. And it includes our core product, our 1 through 14 DVD series. And you get the outlines, quizzes, and the notebook, everything with it for free. So it's a $214 product, and we're selling it right now $159.20. You can go to our website or call in here, 1-800-END-TIME to order. The second deal is the Truth Seeker package. And I can't believe they're selling this for as low as they are, but it's the Understanding the Bible DVD series, which is 18 DVDs. And then they're selling our Salvation package with it, which is 4 more DVDs, plus the outlines and quizzes and answers, everything. So both sets, it's normally it's like $194. They're selling it for $100, all of that. And so you can call in here and get the Foundation of Prophecy series. Go online, call in here, 1-800-END-TIME, or the Truth Seeker package. And wow, I mean, these guys, I don't know. My wife and all of them are over marketing, and they've dropped the bottom out of this stuff. And we had great response over the weekend. And so I guess the sale's going to end tonight at midnight. If you'd like to get in touch with them, call in here. We will be leaving here at 5 o'clock in another hour or so, hour and a half. So call in here and talk to them, and get the deals while they're hot. And we had a lot of people. They saw this stuff and they went nuts over the weekends. And so call in here, get a hold of these guys, order the stuff, start your Bible studies. What a great resource. Now, I had someone email me recently by the name of Kelly. And Kelly states this. She said, I listen regularly to the radio show, and I regularly send out these messages on Facebook and via email to friends and acquaintances. She said that I can't agree with you more that climate change is the measure that they're going to use to merge and control people. I told her it's a hoax. I agree with you, Kelly. We say that all the time. You regularly say that it's a hoax, but this is so indoctrinated into people that merely calling it a hoax is not going to change people's minds. I believe you change people's minds if you offer the proof of the hoax. Well, Kelly, I would say to you that thank you for the email. And here's the deal, everybody, is that we have new markets all the time. We're going to new radio stations. We just went on a huge new radio station, 770 AM here in Dallas. And so you can listen to it from Waco all the way up to Oklahoma City. That's how big it is. And so we've got a huge new audience. And so sometimes I'll say human-induced global warming, which leads to climate change, is a hoax, and then I'll keep on moving. And so if I would say to you, Kelly, that, again, thank you for your email, that Irvin Baxter and myself, we've reported on the United Nations global warming, climate change propaganda for years now. And we've offered many proofs over the years that it is, in fact, a hoax. However, since you asked, I wanted to give you a few more proofs on today's program that global warming, which leads to climate change, human-induced global warming, that humans are emitting so much carbon dioxide and different supposed gases, which these are not even poison gases. I mean, these are used for plant food. But yet the propaganda coming from the United Nations and all these world governing institutions is that humans are emitting so much carbon emissions that they're causing the planet to warm to the point where there's climate change now, and that all of these tornadoes and hurricanes and all these different climate catastrophes are a result of human-induced global warming, climate change. Well, that's all a hoax. The earth has been heating up and cooling down since God created it about 6,000 years ago. And so you can study your history, look at all the science. God created the earth for a way to heat itself up and cool it down. Most of the heat comes from the sun. And the oceans have a way of dissipating a lot of the heat. God created all this. And it's been functioning like that for thousands of years now. And the climate changes every day. State that all the time. Every day since God created the earth, the climate has changed. It'll be 70 one day, 80 the next, 75 the next day, 95. I mean, everywhere you live, it changes all the time. And so global warming, which leads to climate change, is being spun by those that believe in a world government to scare you into the point where they could regulate everything you do. Because you're scared, because you're creating this global warming climate change, so them as a world government needs to regulate everything you do, how much electricity you use, how much food you eat, what you produce, everything, every aspect of your life. That's where all this mess is headed. And so consequently, it's propaganda. They're trying to establish a world government, and they've got to have teeth. They want to be able to tell you what to do, so they've got to scare you into that. So it's all just propaganda. It's a hoax. But if I just told you that, you would think, okay, Dave Robbins, it's his opinion that it's a hoax, but can he prove it? Well, there's many ways to prove it. I've got books on this stuff written. I had Senator James Inhofe. He sent me a book, signed it, and said, Dave, thank you for telling the truth, because me and Irvin has written articles on this. There's another article coming out in the September-October magazine. Because the International Panel on Climate Change, the scientists that are bought and paid for by the United Nations, we found out that they were covering up a lot of stuff. They were doctoring stuff and all kinds of things. I mean, it was a big mess because it's their propaganda. They have to sell this. And these scientists are getting paid to put out this propaganda in order to scare you. So let me give you a few proofs here, because some of the biggest proofs that I can use are, they are forecasts that have been forecasted years ago that never come to pass. And they were being used to scare people back then. So let's talk about it. The Blaze actually reports that an inconvenient commentary, you know, Al Gore put out then an inconvenient truth. Now he's put out an inconvenient sequel. Well, this is the Blaze's their rendition of an inconvenient commentary. And you have to hear some of this stuff because it is such propaganda. All they're trying to do is scare you. And I'm going to give you some for instances after I'm done here. So, an inconvenient commentary. There are 5 times, I'm going to go over the 5, where climate alarmists, people that are trying to scare you as a result of climate change, that they made horribly wrong predictions. But guess what? They haven't quit making predictions. They're still trying to scare you because they're pushing for a world government. And they know they have to keep you scared in order to get that thing pushed across the finish line. So, obviously, the first one I have to go into is climate change alarmist Al Gore's newest fear-mongering film, An Inconvenient Sequel. It arrived in select movie theaters over the weekend, and unsurprisingly, the film is full of dire warnings about the future of mankind and its allegedly dangerous use of fossil fuels. However, before you trade in your car for a bicycle or your steak for insects, consider that, and I live in Dallas, I'll never trade in a steak for a grasshopper. That's never going to happen. If you live in Texas at all, you know what I'm saying. Texas is meat, brisket, chicken, ribs, you know what I'm saying if you live down in the South anywhere, okay? So, I'm sorry, I had to go there. Consider that for nearly 50 years, climate alarmists have been desperately trying and failing to predict the downfall of the human civilization. They're trying to keep everybody scared so they will allow this world government to control them and to usurp authority over them and everything they do. It's what it's all about, control at the end of the day. So here are 5 examples because it's all about world government. That's why I'm talking about this. The Bible prophesies a world government, And this is an effort to establish a world government. This is one of their scare tactics that they use. It's been used by world empires for years. Scare tactics to control the population. This is modern day scare tactics by a world government. So here are 5 examples of the many times that climate alarmists gazed into their crystal ball and ended up looking more than a little wrong, let's say. Anyway, I'll leave it there. So number 1, the New York Times. The Polar Explorer predicts that the end of the ice at the North Pole. Now, this was in 1969. Now think about that. I was born in 1968. So these guys were saying, hey, back in 1969, 48 years ago, that the end of ice, that as we know it in the North Pole, it's all going to be gone. Now, way back before Leonardo DiCaprio, the rise of Al Gore and the rampant politicization of climate science, polar explorer Colonel Bernd Bolchen was convinced that the North Pole would melt by as early as 1979. Now, the New York Times reported on February 20th, 1969, that Colonel Bernd Bolchen was a polar explorer and a flyer, and it circulated a paper among polar specialists proposing that the Arctic pack ice is thinning and that the ocean at the North Pole may become an open sea within a decade or 2. A number of specialists believe that an ice-free Arctic Ocean would not freeze again once that occurred. Now, needless to say, the North Pole obviously didn't melt. Look at the Google Earth right now. There is a giant North Pole still left. Santa Claus is doing, I shouldn't say that. There might be young kids listening. The North Pole is doing good. It didn't melt. In fact, we now know that the global climate was the tail end of a decades-long cooling period. So now if you look at it, they predicted way back then, the New York Times ran the article that said the end of the polar ice pack over the next 10 to 20 years. Did it happen? No. Go look at Google Earth right now, or some of the pictures, Google images of the polar ice pack. It is enormous. But yet they were saying back then in 69 that it's thinning to the point where in a decade or 2 it's going to be completely gone, and that the north would be the north up there would be a totally open sea. Do you understand? Those people back then were scared of that. But all it was propaganda. They've been propaganding global warming, global cooling for years now, but it's all a hoax. And these are some of the best proofs that I can use. It's simply not happening.
Most people have dreamed of someday walking on the ground where Jesus walked over 2,000 years ago. You don't have to wait any longer. Make this the year for your life-changing experience. This is your official invitation to join Judy and me for our 2017 Fall End Time Prophecy Tour. The trip of a lifetime is a severe understatement. If you could travel to any place on earth, your first choice should definitely be the Holy Land. There is simply no other place like it. Call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463 for more information. Ask to speak to Holly or Jana about the tour.
So I'm giving you some different proofs that the propaganda or the hoax of global warming, which leads to climate change, is simply not happening. At least not human-induced global warming. There might be global warming right now, and there might be global cooling next year. But it's just a hoax. And so you'll recognize that Al Gore, most of you will, that Al Gore is probably the most recognized guy on the planet that's pushing this global warming, which leads to climate change hoax. Only 10 years left. This was back in 2006 that he said only 10 years left to avoid a total disaster. Back in 2006, CBS News asked Al Gore a series of questions about global warming at the Sundance Film Festival, when Gore was promoting an inconvenient truth at that time. And throughout his movie, obviously Al Gore consistently gives the sense that unless something is done immediately, we're all doomed. But he often, not always, but often refrains from giving a specific timetable. So a CBS News report, however, it notes that Gore had predicted that the point of no return. Now think about that. Some people look at that and go, oh, the point of no return. That it would come within 10 years if greenhouse gas emissions weren't reduced substantially. And it stated politicians and corporations have been ignoring the issue for decades, to the point that unless drastic measures to reduce greenhouse gases are taken within the next 10 years, now that would have been last year, 10 years, that the world will reach a point of no return, Gore said, according to the CBS News story. Now, have we reached a point of no return, as Gore suggested? If so, then his inconvenient sequel movie would seem to be rather pointless, wouldn't it? Of course, Gore asked about this. He was asked about this during a June interview with Fox News' Chris Wallace, to which he responded, well, we have seen a decline in emissions on the global basis. For the first time, they've stabilized and started to decline. So some of the responses for the last 10 years have helped, but unfortunately and regrettably, a lot of serious damage has been done. So he didn't deny, he was saying that we're going to be to a point at no return. Chris Wallace asked him, well, what about that? Well, just kind of sloughs it off. We have started to do some things. But when you're talking about a point of no return, you're talking about the earth burning up. And we're not near there. Well, I'm in Dallas, and we're looking at almost 2 inches above average of rain for this year. We're not talking about droughts and things like that. Why isn't this happening? Because it's a hoax. It's all propaganda. Just like before this global warming phase they're going through, it was global cooling, and there's going to be another ice age. It's all about scaring people. That's what it's all based on. So in this interview with Chris Wallace, rather than simply admit that he was wrong, Al Gore amazingly doubled down by suggesting that carbon dioxide emissions, the reductions have somehow immediately stopped the point of no return from materializing. Now, global warming carbon dioxide emissions, according to the International Energy Agency's estimates, increased by several gigatons from 2006 to 2016. So if we were on the edge of a climatic disaster in 2006, we should have definitely crossed that threshold by now, wouldn't you think? And if Gore's predictions were correct. Well, further, and perhaps most important, the IEA attributes much of the drop in carbon dioxide emissions to the United States' use of natural gas, which has boomed because of fracking, a process environmentalists and Democrats largely oppose. So, none of this stuff jives. It doesn't go together because it's a hoax. It's simply a hoax. It's the world government putting out propaganda, it's spinning it. The huge, talk about Bill O'Reilly's spin zone, that's nothing compared to the spin zone he's referring to compared to what the United Nations spins globally. So the biggest drop really came from the United States, where carbon dioxide emissions fell 3% or 160 million tons, while the economy grew by 1.6%. The IAE reported this back in March. So the decline was driven by a surge in shale gas supplies and a more attractive renewable power that displaced coal. Emissions in the United States last year were at their lowest level since 1992, a period during which the economy grew by 80%. So don't be fooled by the more attractive renewable power line either. Al Gore loves to spin that. And the renewable energy source, the sources, solar and wind power, they only account for less than 3% of the United States total energy use. So we're doing pretty good right now. We're not at the tipping point of anything. We're actually doing pretty good. The economy's on a rise right now. So I'm sorry, Mr. Gore, but it's simply not happening. And we really need to try to quit scaring people, and let's be encouraging and quit trying to scare people to try to push this global government. We know there's a world government going to be established. We know that. But us here in the United States, we don't want to be a part of it. The number three proof for you, Kelly, is the New York Times. They said back in 1975 that there's a new ice age on the way. Here's another report from the New York Times. This one was published May 21st, 1975. In this news story, Walter Sullivan noted many scientists believe that global cooling, this was in 75, was inevitable. But he also said, now there was another guy ran by New York Times in 69. Get this, remember that global warming was going to lead the polar ice cap to melt. Now in 75, the New York Times runs a story about a guy that's pushing global cooling. Does that make sense to anybody? But he also said that there were numerous researchers predicting massive catastrophic global warming within the next century. I don't know. It almost becomes laughable. And I don't mean to make light of people and this, that, and the other, but the propaganda itself, I mean, it's just a scare tactic, folks. You got to trust us on that. Go out, do your research. The earth is, God controls the climate. But here's what they're trying to do. Here's the goal. The United Nations wants to remove our reliance upon God out of the picture so that we'll look towards them, this world governing body, as our leader. You see what I'm saying? We have to depend upon God, not any world government ever. No United Nations, no World Bank, World Health Organization. That's all. Those guys can have those organizations. I'm looking to God. He's the one that's got his hand on the thermostat. He controls the climate. Always has, always will. All this other stuff, propaganda, a hoax. Can you see where I'm coming from, Kelly? So, here are some of the highlights from the article in 1975 from the New York Times. You just got to hear this. The world climate is changing. Here they go with the propaganda again. Of that, scientists are firmly convinced. But in what direction? And why are we subjects of the deepening debate? There are specialists, now this is the 1975 article, there are specialists who say that a new ice age is on the way, the inevitable consequence of a natural cyclic process or as a result of man-made pollution of the atmosphere. And there are those who say that such pollution may actually head off an ice age. Sooner or later, a majority of cooling of the climate is widely considered inevitable. Hints that it may already have begun are evident. There is general agreement that introducing large amounts of smoke particles or carbon dioxide in the atmosphere can alter the climate. If worldwide energy consumption continues to increase at its present rates, catastrophic climate changes have been predicted by several scientists. M.I. Budiko, a leading Soviet specialist, he says that the critical level will probably be reached within a century. Now remember, this was in 1975. And this, he has written, will lead to a complete destruction of polar ice covers. Not only would sea levels rise, but with the Arctic Ocean free of ice. Now get this, in the same article, they're predicting global warming. One guy's talking about, the other guy's predicting an ice age. The entire weather system of the northern hemisphere would be altered. Virtually no one today is predicting the complete destruction of polar ice covers today, in 2017, in the near future, or a new ice age, showing that 40 years ago, The scientific community clearly overestimated the effects of human activity on the climate. So the fact of the matter is, there have been so many predictions over the years about global warming, global cooling, this, that, and the other. Everybody, just turn to God. And you can rely on Him to control the temperatures, not man-made global warming. I can drive an SUV if I want to. It's not going to affect the atmosphere at all. If it does, God will take care of it. You see what's going on? The United Nations is a humanistic solution. No reliance upon God. My next one, the United Nations. I'll try to get this before the end of the program. The United Nations, this is the next propaganda spin zone that I want to show you. The United Nations, the entire nations, they stated, could be wiped off the face of the earth. This was back in 1989. The United Nations environmental official Noel Brown predicted absolute chaos in 1989, including dramatic coastal flooding, crop failures, eco-refugees, and more. The only way to save the world was to reverse course on burning fossil fuels within 10 years. Does that sound familiar? The San Jose Mercury News in California reported on June 30, 1989, that a senior environmental official at the United Nations, Noel Brown, says that entire nations could be wiped off the face of the earth by rising sea levels. I just talked the other day about sea levels have actually gone down a little bit over the last 2 years. But he said that the entire nations could be wiped off the face of the planet by rising sea levels if global warming is not reversed, get this, by the year 2000. Now here we are in 2017, and the sea levels have actually gone down a little, a fraction. You see what I'm saying? He said coastal flooding and crop failures would create an exodus of eco-refugees, threatening political chaos. You see the scare tactics we're talking about here? It's been used for years. If they want to get rid of coal-fired electric plants, they start spinning all this stuff. And it's all about creating a global government. All of this, the Sustainable Development Goals, all of this is located in there. Do something about climate change. It's just a spin. And if you do your research, you can see that it all goes back to the establishment of a world governing body. That's what it all boils down to. So Kelly, I hope I've satisfied you in giving you just a few proofs. And there may be some programs where I give specific proofs in the future, but I wanted to show you that for years there's been propaganda and more propaganda in an effort to build a world governing body, and all it is basically a hoax. None of it's ever come true. God controls the temperatures. God controls the climate. Nothing you or I can do can change that.
End of the Age is a production of End Time Ministries. This broadcast will be available on our website, endtime.com, in the archives section. On our website, you'll also find more information about how current events are fulfilling Bible prophecy. To reach our operators, call 1-800-END-TIME. That's 1-800-363-8463. End Time Ministries is partner supported. We would like to say thank you to our partners who made this broadcast possible. To do what Matthew 24:14 said, to reach the world with the gospel of the kingdom.